Hey folks, this is Kelani. It looks like dungeons might be leaps and bounds ahead of raids going into Battle for Azeroth, especially if you're looking for a few gear upgrades. We all know getting at least one Mythic Plus dungeon done per week is a good way to gear up slowly, even if you're not on the cutting edge of raiding progression. An equivalent piece of gear to Mythic raiding loot usually comes from the weekly cache if you complete the current maximum Mythic Plus on the rewards list. So right now that's a plus 15 at the start of Legion, and we're assuming the start of Battle for Azeroth, that's going to be about a plus 10. If they decide to go up to a plus 11 or stay at plus 10, we'll have to see, but that goalpost tends to move throughout the expansion, but as long as you're keeping up to date with the current Mythic Plus rewards and you're getting that maximum level done each week, you should be able to sit back and relax, waiting for Tuesday to roll around to cross your fingers for a piece of gear you can actually use. Whether you can use it or not, you'll be granted a pretty high item level piece of gear. Going into Battle for Azeroth, a few changes are being made to the weekly chest, but don't worry, you're still going to get a good piece of gear as long as you run some Mythic Plus. The first huge change is that it looks like up to 3 pieces of gear can be in your chest. Not 1, not 2, but 3 pieces of gear. That's pretty crazy. I wonder if one of the reasons for this is to try and keep Mythic Plus and dungeons on par with how much loot is awarded when compared to Mythic raiding. Everyone knows the feeling of clearing the current raid once again and coming out with no items to show for it, but in a good week you could get 4 or 5. Mythic Plus was limited quite heavily with just 1 piece of high item level gear coming from the cache each week. Assuming you're doing the plus 10 or the plus 15, whatever rewards the max at the current time, you can't do anything else to increase the item level, increase the number of items, or increase the chances of it being something you can even use. You just can't farm the high item level gear from Mythic Plus reliably. While this doesn't really change any of that, being able to receive up to 3 pieces of gear at least gives you something else to hope for. You can get more than just 1 item on par with Mythic raiding if you're putting in the work to get your Mythic Plus done each week. Now that is up to 3, so there is a little bit of randomness in there as well. You could just get the 1 item as per usual, you could get 2 for a lucky bonus, but if you hit the jackpot you could be walking away from that chest with 3 items all to yourself. If you end up getting lucky with this, you could gear up so incredibly quickly. To top things off, you also have the standard rewards of artifact power to help level up your new amulet, as well as a new Mythic Plus key, just pretty standard stuff at this point in time. Now the way loot works is going to be a little different, mainly because of the Azerite armor that's being introduced in Battle for Azeroth. Azerite armor can't Titan Forge at all. It has very fixed item level values which determines the power of the Azerite traits that each piece of armor makes available. So how does that work with Mythic Plus loot? Every few levels you get another 5 item levels on top of the gear. Well, simply put, you can't get Azerite armor from Mythic Plus dungeons at all. If you're running a Mythic 0 dungeon, you can get Azerite armor pieces from that dungeon, but as soon as you start running Mythic Plus keys, you won't see any Azerite armor from the end of dungeon chest. So that should tell you just how important it is when I say that Azerite armor can come from your weekly chest. That's the only place you're going to see high item level Azerite armor if you're not heading into raids. Getting a piece of Azerite armor in your weekly chest is going to be such a huge boost, and from what little data we have, it seems like the rewards might just be weighted to favour Azerite armor and weapons specifically. There's no confirmation on that, but apparently a lot of people have gotten a piece of Azerite armor and a weapon more than anything else. I'm not saying you're guaranteed a piece of Azerite armor every week, just something to chew on. Take it with a pinch of salt, yada yada. Now, because Azerite armor has fixed item levels, your Mythic Plus Azerite armor will follow along with the item level of the current raid's Azerite armor. If you complete a plus 2 to a plus 3 key, any Azerite armor you get in your weekly cache will be item level 340, which puts it on par with Mythic 0 dungeons. A plus 4 to plus 6 key nets you 355 Azerite armor, which is on par with normal Uldir. Plus 7 to plus 9 bumps it up to 370, which is heroic Uldir level, and to get the highest possible Azerite armor, you need to do a plus 10 or above. That will get you 385 Azerite armor, which is on par with Mythic Uldir. So chances are, if you get a high Mythic Plus key done each week, you should be rolling in decent Azerite armor within a few weeks. Maybe even just the 1 week if you get super lucky and get 3 pieces of gear. I would be really interested to see the actual motivations behind these changes. Imagine if you could be in the meeting room with all of this going on. To me it seems like they definitely want to push interest in Mythic Plus as an endgame alternative to raiding. These changes allow you to get more gear under your belt, potentially gear up faster, but also give you way more access to the higher item level gear. At the same time, they couldn't just guarantee the 3 pieces of gear, that would probably be too much, but raiders typically come away from raids with a handful of items each, so introducing a bit of a scale on the best rewards from Mythic Plus keep it competitive with raiding. Sure, you might only get 1 item, but you could get 3. That potential alone will ensure people play Mythic Plus. The more people that get involved in Mythic Plus, the more potential to continue their adventure into the esports world. I wouldn't be surprised if the MDI was the main motivation behind some of these changes. Get people interested, get them involved, and before you know it, more people are signing up for the MDI, more people are watching MDI. It's a win-win for Blizzard on all fronts, and if we get some extra gear along the way, that's a win for us too. The rest of your loot will work in a similar way to Legion. Depending on the key you're running, you'll be awarded a specific item level of loot at the end of each run. Mythic Dungeons drop item level 340 gear, which is probably where a lot of people will start off. Plus 2 keys drop 345 item level gear at the end of the dungeon, and if a plus 2 key is the highest you complete, you'll be awarded 355 loot in your weekly cache. That's except for Azeroth armor obviously, which we already went through. Plus 3 keys award 345 at the end of the dungeon and 355 in your weekly cache. Plus 4 is 350 for the end of dungeon, 360 in your weekly cache. Plus 5 is 355 in the dungeon, 360 in your cache. Plus 6 is 355 in dungeon, 365 in cache. Plus 7 is 360 in dungeon, 370 in cache. Plus 8 is 365 in dungeon, 370 in cache. Plus 9 is 365 in dungeon, 375 in cache. And a plus 10 will get you 370 in dungeon with 380 in your cache. That's a lot of numbers. Apparently you have to run a plus 11 key to get the highest item level of normal, non-Azeroth armor loot in your weekly cache, which would be 385, but right now 370 is probably the max you can get in end of dungeon chests. So when you're going to open the weekly chest, be sure to keep all of your fingers crossed. Who knows, you might end up with a 385 Azeroth armor piece, a 385 weapon, and a 385 trinket, all in your first week. Part of me wants to jump around and joy that we can gear up a bit faster for Mythic Plus, but then I remember that if getting 3 items is possible, anyone who doesn't get 3 items is probably going to feel cheated or unlucky. That's never a good feeling, and while I would want to say you should be happy with whatever the chest supplies you with, I know that if I get a single item, and several chaps are running around in my guild who got 3, I'm going to be salty as all hell about that for sure. Luck played a huge part in gearing up at the start of Legion. The people who got the best legendaries did better because they were lucky. The few people who got multiple legendaries in the first week were laughing it up on the DPS meters. Anyone who got the powerful items from their weekly chest the first few weeks in a row were quite a good chunk ahead of everyone else. When Lady Luck plays a huge part of your progression right at the start of an expansion, it sure can feel lame when she doesn't grant you her favour. We'll have to see how everything pans out. Just know that 3 items in your chest is really, really lucky. It's okay if you don't get that every week. That's what I'll be telling myself anyway. But these aren't the only changes hitting Mythic Plus going into Battle for Azeroth. There's a handful of others which you might not be aware about. Bonus rolls are changing quite a bit as well, which does affect Mythic Plus, believe it or not. I know, you can't use bonus rolls in Mythic Plus Dungeons Kelani. How can that possibly be relevant? Well, good sir, or madam, you can use your bonus rolls in Mythic Plus dungeons in Battle for Azeroth. At the end of the dungeon, when you get your chest full of loot, you can also get the option to bonus roll. We're assuming at this point that you're bonus rolling on the entire dungeon, just like how the chest can have any piece of gear from any of the bosses. So if you really need something from a specific dungeon, you now have an extra chance or 2 per week. Obviously that relies on a little bit of luck once again, but don't fret. If you fail the roll, you still get some artifact power to take home. The good old consolation prize. Now I said 1 or 2. That wasn't a mistake. You can only pick up 2 bonus rolls per week in BFA, so you're going to have to make a tough decision between some Mythic Plus dungeons or the raid bosses who are always so stingy with their loot. Only 2 rolls per week. That's pretty harsh. Hopefully they have a higher chance to actually reward something though. The way affixes work is also changing. Just in case you didn't know, you either get Fortified or Tyrannical at level 2 now, so every key you run will have one of those affixes active. Then you get a new affix at 4, another one at 7, and the last one at 10. Those are also the brackets for obtaining better Azeroth armor in your weekly cache, just in case you didn't notice that. So as you add each affix, your potential Azeroth armor goes up in item level to match the next tier of raiding. That also means that plus 10 keys will actually be jammed full of 4 affixes total. Mythic Plus is certainly going to be an interesting adventure next expansion. And then, just in case you weren't aware, once again, you can't swap around gear anymore in Mythic Plus dungeons, which probably won't affect you too much and hopefully won't really affect anything all too much anyway, because these dungeons are designed with Mythic Plus in mind, whereas Legion dungeons necessarily weren't, especially to the high level which some people got to. So fingers crossed it doesn't really end up mattering. I don't think we'll see as many problems come from gear swapping restrictions as some people seem to think, but I guess only time will tell. But that's it for this video. How do you feel about the weekly chest changes? Will you be putting more effort into Mythic Plus dungeons this time around? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. If you want to hop on that train, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.